Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 106th meeting of the Lakeside Toastmasters Club. I hope you have all had a wonderful festive period. Let me begin this evening's presentation by introducing myself to those of you who may not already know me. My name is Teraza Ponalumi. I am currently completing a BA Honours degree in International Politics at the University of South Africa. This evening, I am here as a Decoloniality student in order to present my project to all of you. Throughout this presentation, I hope to enlighten you all as to what decoloniality is. By the end of this presentation, you should be able to have a clear understanding of what decoloniality entails. Through this presentation, I hope that my project will be implemented here at the Lakeside Toastmasters Club and during future meetings. Through the implementation of this project, I hope to positively influence the Lakeside Toastmasters Club. Briefly, this presentation occurs in 3 parts. In the first part, I will explain in depth what decoloniality means and what it entails. In the second part, I will provide you with the decolonial principles which are applicable to the Lakeside Toastmasters Club. During this part of the presentation, I will clearly and in-depth explain each principle as well as describe how each principle can be applied or implemented within the Lakeside Toastmasters Club. It will be worth noting that what kind of changes will be made to the club. These changes are, of course, anticipated. Within the third part of the presentation, I will provide you with an explanation as to why decoloniality should be embraced by the club. Additionally, I will explain the purpose of the project. Decoloniality embodies many things. It is a way of being, thinking, behaving, and seeing. Decoloniality transcends the ordinary way we see the world and the various social, political, economic value systems and institutions. At the essence of decoloniality is being critical and asking questions. You have to question the knowledge you have and how it came about, because knowledge is power. Then you have to question what that power means and what that power is capable of. You have to question the hierarchies and dualisms which exist in society and ask why they exist. You have to question how the countless theories which exist came about. The significance of decoloniality is that it is quite unconventional. What makes decoloniality significant to you, to me, to the Lakeside Toastmasters Club, and society is that it invokes critical thinking, it encourages revolutionary thoughts. Decoloniality promotes African existential thinking. If you think about it, everything around us is Western or influenced by Western culture. I mean, how many times a week or a month do you eat McDonald's or Burger King or KFC, and how many times a week or a month do you eat traditional food such as potjiekos or bobotie? Take our clothing in another instance. If you have ever seen traditional African print, you know that it is colorful, vibrant, and unique, yet how often does anyone wear them? We prefer to adorn ripped jeans and new Nike or Adidas khakis. These sorts of things seem rather trivial and are often ignored. However, if you embrace a decolonial attitude, you will realize that this is the Western influence over us, because we are still trying to be Western and modern, and the Western world only encourages it. Now, the purpose of decoloniality is not to slander the Western world. Decoloniality makes us aware of how the West continues some sort of subtle, informal control over Africa and all those who inhabit it. This brings me to yet another way in which decoloniality is significant. Decoloniality allows us and encourages us to put focus back onto Africa, the former colonies and the former colonized. An important aspect of decoloniality is the decolonial principles, which I will get to in a second. Let me just let the slides keep up. Okay, an important aspect of decoloniality is the decolonial principles. There are 6 decolonial principles. The first decolonial principle is the intricate systems of power. The systems of power brought forth by decoloniality include who is to dominate and who is to be dominated, or who is to be oppressed and who is to be the oppressor. The use of this sort of system of power is to bring about the domination and exploitation of those who will be dominated and oppressed. Through decoloniality, we are able to break down and understand the logic behind such systems of power and their uses. The second decolonial principle includes transcending colonial ideals which underlie duality, hierarchy, and fragmentation. Various hierarchies and dualities were brought about by coloniality. Hierarchies and dualities were significant to coloniality since they reinforced expectations about who is to dominate and who is to be dominated. Fragmentation tends to be inherent in these hierarchies and dualities since, for example, the relationship between those dominated and those who dominate is neither equal nor mutual. The oppressed cannot attempt to oppress the oppressors. The praxis, which is the third decolonial principle, entails understanding how theories are derived from lived experiences. The last 3 decolonial principles are more applicable to the Lakeside Toastmasters Club. First is that knowledge, power, and being are intricately linked. As I mentioned earlier, knowledge is power. Western modes of knowledge invoke Western modes of power. In other words, knowledge can be used to assert power. Decoloniality becomes relevant here in order for knowledge to be unbound and emancipated from colonial constraints. Additionally, decoloniality can be used to highlight the use of power to oppress or marginalize, which we all know is an intricate part of colonialism. In Toastmaster speeches are typically given during meetings. Usually, what is spoken about in these speeches reflect your knowledge. As mentioned earlier, knowledge can have colonialist elements. Knowledge can reflect the Western notions of knowledge and ideas about what knowledge is. In moving the Lakeside Toastmasters Club down a decolonial road, this principle can be applied through the speeches conducted during the meetings and the topics discussed during the speeches. A way in which we can do this is by incorporating Africa into our speeches. Enhance your knowledge in areas pertaining to gender, race, blackness, sexuality, spirituality, nature, and life. In doing so, you can broaden your mind and your thoughts and knowledge beyond colonial strictures and attitudes. This principle is fairly linked to the next principle of critical thinking and critical knowledge. Decoloniality and decolonial thinking fully entails critical thinking and allowing African history to be the foundation and focus of analysis. Broaden your understanding about African history. This principle can be applied to the Lakeside Toastmasters Club through an increased incorporation of Africa's history in this critical analysis part of meetings, that is, the debate session. Debates can focus on Africa's rich history with reference to various African cultures, traditions, people, and African indigenous knowledge, as opposed to debating issues more on the western end of the spectrum. Additionally, since many of our meetings carry specific themes, we should host more meetings which are themed more centrally to Africa. Such themes could include, for example, a celebration of African legacies or embracing African cultures, where members attend meetings in cultural clothing. Finally, we have the decolonial principle of transdisciplinarity. The aim of this principle is to remove fragmentation of knowledge. The way this is done is through the promotion of independent and creative thinking that is also critical and revolutionary, applying the 2 principles just mentioned through the incorporation of African culture, indigenous knowledge, cultures, and so on into the meetings, speech topics, and debates. The Lakeside Toastmasters Club will be able to enter into a stage of transdisciplinarity. So again, the way forward, or the way this principle can be reinforced and implemented into the club, is by basically reinforcing the first 2 principles, since they remove any fragmentation in our knowledge, and that is done through our welcoming of anything African into our knowledge, or enhancing our knowledge of Africa. I'm sure you must all be wondering, why should decoloniality be embraced into Toastmasters, and why these principles should be applied? Well, Toastmasters broadly entails creating future leaders, but since it is a Western conception, it will lead to future leaders with a more Western frame of mind. Therefore, decoloniality will allow the incorporation of African structures into the overall Toastmasters conception, thus creating leaders who have an African frame of mind. While it is important to groom future leaders in terms of decoloniality and for the benefit of Africa, it is equally important for future leaders to be groomed within African strictures. Recently, and with the launch of the new APSA campaign, there has been a lot of talk on Africanacity. Well, this is decolonial. APSA has defined Africanacity as the African ability to go about completing activities in an African way or in a manner which is unique to Africa. So, with the implementation of this project, we will be taking Toastmasters and its future leaders and placing them within the context of Africanacity, or rather, bringing Africanacity to you through decoloniality and the decolonial principles. Okay, now I'd like to have a quick question and answer session, or just an open discussion session. We are limited on time, but your opinions are welcomed.
Embracing Africa into our club will make us decolonial.
Yes, in a sense, that's